how to change your life in a year. What you can accomplish in a year and the amount of change that you can create on a personal level, on a professional level, can be crazy. You can do so much in a year. And so that's what I plan to break down in this video, is how to create that change in your life and to create meaningful change. Because in the past, personally, I felt like I was living the same 6 months over and over again. And it wasn't until I put meaningful thought and effort into creating change in my life until I actually was able to implement change and then keep that change. Because in the past, I would make a change for 2 weeks and then I would slip away from those things. And it wasn't until I started practicing a few specific things that I actually was able to create that meaningful change. So I promise you by the end of this video, you will understand how to change your life in a year. And I plan to show you our 4-step framework with really helpful steps along the way that you can use this framework with almost any problem in your life. And you're gonna wanna stay around to the last step because the last step is the most important of all. So the first step in the process, if you want to create meaningful change, is to stabilize. Actually just sit down. I encourage you to sit down outside, don't have your phone, don't have anything, and just think about what needs to change in your life. What are the things in your life that you are not satisfied with and you want to make changes within? And if you're having struggles coming up with these categories or domains that are easily separated, I would encourage you to take the balance wheel in the description below. Because this balance wheel can lay out your life in a whole pie, and then you're able to break down ideas and where you want to make these changes, because you'll rate your life in each category on a scale of 1 to 10. So this can be a really helpful tool throughout this, so I would encourage you to take this at the end of this video. But once you get the categories of your life, and maybe you're already sure of the changes that you want to make, I would encourage you then to ask yourself in a third-person view what needs to change. So instead of thinking about what you want to change and how you want to change it, think about your situation as if it was your best friend's situation. What would you tell them? What are some of the things that you would point out to them that they may have blind spots within? Because you're probably facing those same blind spots. Because often when we try to change our own lives, when we try to figure it out ourselves, a lot of our emotions get involved, and we get that resistance of, you know what, I don't want to change this because it's going to be hard, or I like the way I am, or I'm comfortable. But if your friend had told you their aspirations and then told you their situation, their emotions you would disregard. You would tell them that you need to be better because you've told me this. And I'm sure you have a lot of those same promises with yourself that you're not holding because you're facing emotional resistance. Or maybe you want to stay the same way because you're comfortable, and that may be subconscious. But taking this third-person view can help to get over some of those things. So once you've taken the balance wheel, and once you've taken that third-person approach at looking at some of the problems you want to change, it's time to ask yourself the question, why do you want to make these changes? And you might be like, Chris, why do I even ask myself the question, why do I want to make these changes? Yes, I want to make these changes because I already know why I want to make these changes. Well, when you actually put meaningful thought of why you want to make these changes, you're going to get to the root cause of it. And don't judge yourself for the reason you want the thing you want, because it may get ugly. Right? Just recently, I've been going through this client acquisition course and building systems around that. And this is one of the activities, was to actually go down and ask yourself why. So if you want to make $1 million a year, for example, you'd ask yourself why. Well, I want the freedom to be able to provide my family. Well, why do you want that freedom? Why do you want to be able to provide my family? Well, that's what I think a man should do. And you just continue to go down the list, and eventually you'll get to the root cause where you cannot go any deeper. I would encourage you to actually do this with your situation, with whatever it is. Maybe you want to lose 15 pounds. Maybe you want to make $1 million a year. Maybe you want to find a partner and get married. Maybe you want to get better with your time and not waste 2 hours a day on Instagram. I don't know what it is, but I would really encourage you to actually go through this and ask yourself why, and I like to call it the why chain, and just go through and continue to get to the root cause. Because once you get to that root cause, you can hold it with you throughout this thing to actually create the change and stick with this change. So you ask yourself why you want to change, you go through the balance wheel, you go through that third-person view, and then finally, in the first step of stabilization, you ask yourself what's working so far in your life. Maybe your fitness is a 9 out of 10 and your relationship is a 2 out of 10. Well, you can take those and you can figure out and extrapolate some of those habits from fitness and take it over to the relationships. And I'll explain that later. But it can be really helpful to look at what in your life is working really well and what do you want to be different, and actually breaking that down. And again, the balance wheel serves as a great tool to do something like that. The second step in the process is going to be to visualize. And I would encourage you to ask yourself, what does amazing look like in 12 months from now? So you've identified the areas you want to make changes, ideally with the help of the balance wheel. And then you take those ideas of what you want to change and you ask yourself, what does amazing look like a year from now in those areas? Because what you're going to get is you're going to get your current situation and your desired situation. And then you have all this arbitrage in between, which we will get into confronting in the next step. So you ask yourself, what does amazing look like? Because then you're going to get a really good ideal. And I would encourage you to think big. I'm reading a book called 10x is easier than 2x. It's a great book, but 10x thinking makes it a lot easier. So what I encourage you to do is think big. Don't go for a 10% improvement. Go for a 10x improvement, because this improvement, there's very few ways to get there. So instead of losing 5 pounds, there's a lot of ways to lose 5 pounds. You could lose 5 pounds by walking every day, eating less, whatever. But if your goal, over 10 years or whatever it is, you want to lose 50 pounds, there's very few ways to lose 50 pounds. You have to go about it a certain way. So it makes it really easy. So actually go big on what does amazing look like. And once you ask yourself, what does amazing look like? I also want you to ask yourself, what does the new amazing you look like? When you ask yourself what amazing looks like, you get your situation. But when you get what does the new amazing you look like, you're gonna get a new identity, and you're gonna use this again in the next step. So you're gonna ask yourself, what does the new amazing you look like? What are the characteristics you have? How do you behave? How do you act? Things like that. It's gonna be helpful. And then finally, in the visualization step, you're also gonna visualize all the work it's gonna take to get there. And this is key. This is so important, because I think a lot of people marry themselves to the outcome. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna make $1 million a year. And then they go to start making their first $1,000 a year or whatever it is in this new opportunity vehicle that they're hopping into to make this $1 million. And they didn't think about any of the work and how difficult it can be to make $1 million. Not saying that you can't make it or it's super difficult. It's just that it takes work. And so people don't think about the work and the process it's gonna take. But if you can visualize it beforehand, it's gonna be a lot easier when you confront it. Because you're like, you know what, I was ready for this. I knew that losing these 50 pounds was gonna be hard, that I was gonna have to be consistent, I was gonna have to get up when I didn't want to, and I'm ready for it because I thought about it and I visualized it. So the third step in the process is to strategize. You're gonna ask yourself, what are the helpful and hurtful habits that you have right now in your life? So as I mentioned earlier in the balance wheel, you can take an area that you have a 9 out of 10 in and ask yourself, what are the helpful habits that I have in this area that I can then take and put it into a 2 out of 10 area? So for example, if you have that 9 out of 10 in fitness, you probably have really good consistency related to it, really good discipline, you enjoy it, you feel satisfied with where you're at with your fitness. What you can do is you can take that consistency, you can take that discipline, you can try to find ways to take that enjoyment and then put it into a 2 out of 10 area. So maybe you just take the consistency from fitness, apply the consistency to some other area of your life, maybe your relationships are poor, whatever, and they need more consistency because relationships take time and effort, and you need that consistent time and effort to make them great. So you take that consistency, you put it over there, and maybe you can get from a 2 out of 10 relationship to a 5 out of 10 relationship. So you can build off your helpful habits. You can also ask yourself, what are your hurtful habits that you have within your relationships that are causing the 2 out of 10? Maybe you're being avoidant in that area. And then you can take that hurtful habit, get rid of it there, and then look in another area. Maybe in your professional job satisfaction, you have a 6 out of 10, and it's because you're being really avoidant about things. And what you can do is you take that 6 out of 10, get rid of the avoidance that you found in your relationship, and get that to an 8 out of 10. So it's helpful to look at these different areas of the balance field to identify your helpful and your hurtful habits to move through these things. Now, after you've looked at your habits within your strategy, you're then gonna wanna ask yourself, how would future you go about solving these problems and making these changes happen? That's why you visualize your future identity and what you would be like, because then you can almost like take their thinking. It's like you go to the third person level again, as we did in step 1. You can go to your third person and be like, oh, that is how I would do it in the future. That's how future and me do it. And you get rid of your emotions again, and you can ask yourself, how would future you go about it? And within this strategy, I would also encourage you to ask yourself, what systems can you put in place to make these easier? So with systems related to change, I like to think that system makes the action much easier. So for example, if you want to lose 50 pounds, a good system to have would be to set out your clothes the night before, to set out your water, to set out your breakfast so it's easy to make, and get ready for the day, to make it so easy to execute. Maybe to set 3 alarms to guarantee that you wake up, whatever. So ask yourself, what systems can you put in place to make this change easier to happen and make yourself more consistent? One of my favorites was the bullet journal. You can look them up online. I don't need to necessarily explain them, but they were a helpful tool for me. On top of, I have another system, very simple, but I just use all of these sticky notes to track everything I'm gonna do in a day. So I really like that stuff as well. So systems can help you. And then also in your strategy, ask yourself, what barriers are you gonna come up against along the way? Because when losing 50 pounds, there's gonna be barriers you're gonna face. There's gonna be times you're gonna get up and be like, I do not wanna go to the gym. Or there's gonna be exercises that you're not gonna know how to do, but they may be beneficial to you losing the weight, and you may enjoy them, you just don't know how to do them. It's another barrier. If you ask yourself what barriers you're gonna face along the way, you can act in a proactive instead of a reactive state, which is really key in making change. Because if we're in a reactive state, it can be really easy to lose the momentum and really easy to go back to our old ways. But if you're proactive, you visualize the work, and you also think about what barrier is gonna come up for you, it's easier to get over those things. Now, finally in strategy, it's time to actually ask yourself, what is the first step to get to momentum? So again, let's rely on the 50 pounds, losing the 50 pounds. The first step could be going on your first run, or maybe it's signing up for the gym membership and going to the gym one time. But if you can get that first step going and get that momentum, it becomes a lot easier, because I can truly attest to you that starting is the hardest part. As someone who had a 4.0 GPA in high school and college, has been into fitness for 6 years and has gone from 132 pounds to 203 this last week. As someone who has started their own business, I can tell you that starting is the hardest part. Once you get that momentum, it's a lot easier to do these things. So that is going to be the key in strategy. Is find yourself, what habits, what would future you do, and how can you gain that momentum? Fourth and the final step in this process is the most important, and is to execute, to make it happen. Make these changes happen. And the best way to make these things happen is to remember why you are doing it. And for me, I really struggled with perfectionism for a long time. And so what I had to do is I had to create my reminders in my life to realize that the outcome is not the goal. It's not about getting the 100 out of 100. What's the goal is how hard I tried and how hard I worked and how hard I can continue to push my skill of working. And Alex Ramosi taught me that concept. And so one of my favorite sticky notes I have up, it's really the only sticky note I have that's a reminder in my office, is that the work is the goal. It's as simple as that for me. It's a good reminder for me that for me to execute on not being a perfectionist anymore, at least in the realm of working and related to outcomes, I have to focus on my work. And so that was a reminder that's really helpful for me. And one of my clients likes to put a photo of one of his favorite boxing matches above his office desk. It's really helpful for him. So for you, ask yourself, what reminders can you put in your life for you to remember why you are making this change, or something related to the change you are making. So remembering why and those reminders can be really helpful. And execution is just taking action. It's as simple as taking the thought out of it. So instead of thinking about going to the gym, how can you make it happen where you just get up and you execute and go to the gym? One of the best mindsets I've taken with me is that how you do anything is how you do everything. And so I did big work to do when it came to my just like messiness in terms of leaving my shoes everywhere, leaving plates in my house. And it's something that's like so simple to me, but it is how I do anything, is how I do everything. Same thing when I was working, I still work at Costco as a day job. And it was as simple as, for me, when I see any piece of trash, picking that up, or something where it doesn't belong, actually picking that up and moving it. It's easy to do and it seems like not a big deal, but how you do anything is how you do everything, and that's how you can develop your skill of execution. So that was how to change your life in a year. If you haven't, go ahead and take that balance wheel now, and you can go through this process with it, and it's really helpful. Also, if you'll comment on this video, I know what you guys enjoy, and I can continue to make these more and more. And if you'll like and subscribe, it helps the channel as well.